Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching News in Depth. After weeks of mass protests, the Bulgarian government has collapsed. What awaits the country now? To talk about it, we're joined by our Balkans correspondent, Paweł Trzaskowski. Good afternoon, Paweł.
Hello, Maciej. Good to be here.
You've spent some time in Bulgaria. Are you surprised by what happened today?
Not really, Maciej. Not really. If you factor in 9 governments that Bulgaria has had over the last 5 years, including the interim governments, if you factor in 6 snap elections in Bulgaria since 2021, no, today's government resignation does not come as a surprise.
Although it was only yesterday the already former Prime Minister Zhelyazkov was assuring the public opinion that the government would survive the vote of non-confidence. But
that is true, yes. So Zhelyazkov wanted to present himself as a statesman who is going to introduce Bulgaria into the Eurozone, which is going to happen on the 1st of January. But as you mentioned, that was yesterday. Today, his minority coalition government was supposed to face a vote of no confidence, not the first vote of confidence since Zhelyazkov's government was formed in January.
6th or 7th?
Something somewhere there, yes. Not the first since the government was formed in January this year, actually. So yesterday Zhelyazkov was certain, but today I think he did the maths and it turned out that the numbers are not there for his coalition government. I was told by one of my sources actually that there was an unwritten arrangement in the coalition agreement that this government that was there since January, will be stable enough to guarantee Bulgaria entering the Eurozone. And since we know it's happening, it's inevitable, maybe that's one of the reasons why the numbers were not there ahead of the vote of no confidence.
Right, Paweł. So we know what happened yesterday. Well, yesterday actually there was a mass protest again in Sofia, but I don't think that it was this particular protest that led to the government's collapse, right? Because the demonstrators were urging the Prime Minister to step down for quite a long time, as we've already stated. What's the problem in Bulgaria that people take to the streets?
Well, yesterday's protest was an openly anti-government protest, but this move started at least sometime around summer this year, and it was incited by the arrest of the mayor of Varna, he was detained on suspicion on corruption charges, and he was being arrested for a prolonged time. Some people in Bulgaria said that he was becoming one of the first political prisoners in the country, and there were protests organized in support of the mayor of Varna across the country. So that was one of the reasons that the pressure was mounting. But 3 weeks ago, the government of Zhelyazkov announced a budget plan for 2026, and this is when the first of the new series of protests started, and that was an openly anti-budget protest. After this one, the government...
So was this supposed to be an austerity budget? Why? Why was it so controversial?
One of the reasons was that the taxes were supposed to be higher in the 2026 budget. That was also, we need to mention that the first budget in euro, so some people were concerned that that might affect their personal finances, but also there was this controversial part that, you know, the workers of the public sector were going to have their salaries increased, but the cost will be borne by the private companies, by the middle class, by those who have their own small businesses. So that was the first reason behind these protests. People took to the streets after the protests, which were one of the biggest protests that Bulgaria has seen in a while, and Bulgaria sees a lot of protests in the streets. The government goes out and says, okay, we withdraw the project. But they do not. They do not do that, and a couple of days later there's another protest, much bigger, in various cities across the country, and this time they go out again and say, okay, so we withdraw the project, but this time for real. And they did so. However, a week later, we see what we witnessed yesterday, mass protests across Bulgaria. Also, I saw some protesters in Germany as well, so it was bigger than that. And after these protests, as you mentioned, the government steps down.
Right, so you've joined the political landscape in Bulgaria and explained what led to protests. Now, what led to the government's collapse. Now, let's listen to Bulgarians themselves, what they think about the events of the last few days.
I expect them to stall a bit longer and then resign, because essentially they have already divided all cards in the government. I think the public uproar will gradually force them to step down, because many reforms are needed, the judicial system above all. Once the judicial system is fixed, everything else will fall into place, absolutely everything. The most important reason we are here is that half of the country's young people have left solely because of these same people. They may look different, but in reality they are the same. We are here because we are tired, and we don't want all our relatives to live abroad. We want to stay in Bulgaria, and the only way to stay in Bulgaria is to save Bulgaria, and that will happen, if not today, then tomorrow. I expect this government to be abolished, for new elections to be held, and I believe that the reaction of the people, the rise of the people, will force them to choose the real democratic parties, not the corpulent parties of GERB and DPS. A new beginning, that's it.
So the wishes have come true, at least for some of the residents of Sofia. But there was something very particular in one of these vox pops we've just listened to. Young people were mentioned. So is this a sort of a generational revolution?
They were actually missing from the vox pop. You actually saw middle-aged men speaking, and one of them referring to the fact that a lot of young people left Bulgaria. Bulgaria is a member of the EU, so it's easy for them to find employment somewhere else. But this is one of the things that the observers of political scene in Bulgaria draw attention to, that these protests that we have witnessed over the last 3 weeks, they are attended in vast numbers by the young generation, the Gen Z, if you will. And this is a new phenomenon in Bulgaria, because the youth has been largely absent from political life in the country for at least a decade now.
Who will they vote for? Because now there's no government.
That's a good question, because what we have seen over the last 5 years in Bulgaria is, as we already mentioned, 9 different governments, 6 snap elections, but you see a configuration, different reconfigurations of the old political system, and we had a lot of beginnings, but there was not a single new beginning in Bulgarian politics over this period. So maybe a new political class will have to emerge for these young people to vote for. This is something similar actually that we're observing in Serbia at the moment. For a year, for almost a year, we've had these student-led protests that are opposing the government, the old political elite. So maybe this is just a new political force forming there in both countries. Well, let's stay in Bulgaria.
Right, but this is quite particular. I mean, the political class is largely closed, as I understand it. Right, it's quite hermetical. Now, on the other side, the system itself is extremely fragile. Right, there have been so many changes of governments in the last few years. Why is it so?
The first thing that makes Bulgarian politics so fragile and not stable is the fact that the political scene is very fragmented. At the moment, you have 9 political parties in the National Assembly, in the Bulgarian Parliament. 4 of them form a coalition government, that it's still a minority government. And they need additional satellite party that is not in the coalition to vote anything in their favor. So that's the first thing.
But how likely is it that the new government will in fact have, a stable majority in the parliament?
Well, this is absolutely unlikely. And this is what we've been witnessing over the last 5 years. That you had the average lifespan of a coalition government in Bulgaria is 6 months. The one that is collapsing as we speak was in power since January. So it exceeded these expectations. Actually, I was actually told by one of my sources that there was I've already mentioned that, unwritten arrangement, Eurozone.
Yeah. Let's listen to Spasimir Domaracki, how he sees the political stability of Bulgaria.
What is happening now is that we actually see another episode of the battle that started in 2020 and 2021 against the stage capture associated with Borisov and Peevski. In other words, after a year of returning to power, they proved that they have no other option, no other way of doing politics than the one that we saw over the last year. And this is what brought people on the streets. We heard Borisov that he is trying to play the responsible statesman, claiming that he will talk about any changes and resignations only after 1st of January, claiming that it is his task and his responsibility to bring Bulgaria to the Eurozone. But we need to be aware that actually the real tangible changes that occurred were during the Petkov's government, and the steps that were being made that brought the country and met some of the expectations from the European Union partners that allowed both Bulgaria to join the Schengen zone and the Eurozone.
Now, our expert, Spasimir Domaracki, pointed out to two strong figures of the Bulgarian politics, namely Borisov and Dylan Peevski. Now, they've been the ones that the crowds in Sofia were demanding to abandon the political stage in Bulgaria. Why so?
Most prominently Dylan Peevski, because he is a Bulgarian tycoon who is also sanctioned by the US and the UK under Magnitsky Act. So these are sanctions that stem from corruption charges. And Dylan Peevski has been, an important element of the coalition without being in the coalition. So his approval, the approval of his party, of the party that he took over actually, was needed for the Boyko Borisov's, or actually Borisov and Zhelyazkov's government to vote anything. And if you look at the footage from the protests, you will see actually that there are a lot of banners, a lot of posters with Dylan Peevski and with the protesters demanding him out of the government, even though he's not in the government, but he's pulling the strings.
Right. Now, there's one more issue we should talk about. How can we be absolutely sure that the current protest, the unrest in Bulgaria, has not been fueled by a foreign state actor?
If by foreign state actor you imply Russia, then I wouldn't actually point fingers there, because the crowd that has been gathering in Bulgaria over the last 3 weeks is openly pro-European. These are young people who embrace the Eurozone, who embrace the European Union. They see it as a value that Bulgaria is an EU member state. However, there have been protests in Bulgaria, probably fueled by Russia and Russian propaganda, and these were actually protests against Bulgaria adopting the common European currency. They had their peak sometime around summer this year. But once it became obvious that Bulgaria will join the Eurozone, they dissipated.
What will happen in Bulgaria after January 1st, with Eurozone already there?
Well, it shouldn't be a big shock to Bulgaria, to be honest, because Bulgarians' currency, lev, has been coupled with first the German mark since 1999 and then with euro, so the exchange rate is solid. So there should be some aftershocks, of course, but probably it will not be very brutal to the economy.
Right, Paweł. So to sum up, your forecast for the next, let's say, 2 months in Bulgaria.
Well, maybe in the next 2 months, Bulgaria will be able to actually hold snap elections, the 7th snap elections in 5 years, unless we see a new political force emerging, or unless some of the current political forces that we already see will be able to convince the young generation that they are their representatives. We might see 8th snap elections.
But as you said, that seems rather unlikely that the old political class will get the votes of the young protesters. Our Balkans correspondent, Paweł Trzaskowski,
Always a pleasure.
was our guest this afternoon. Thank you very much, Paweł.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.